In this video I'm going to show the process of connecting CattronLink to a OCU or an MCU and doing a firmware update and a configuration update. So here on the left we have a 17R MCU which is turned on. It's in passive mode. You can see the status LED at the top is illuminated and nothing is turned on in terms of the relays. The OCU here is turned off. It's in sleep state. If I go to CattronLink and I click on device, new device, it'll come up with this screen here from where I can scan devices, and it will show the MCU because the MCU is in passive state. It won't show the OCU because the OCU is not turned on. The MCU has already been upgraded, both firmware and configuration. So I'm going to give you a demonstration of what to do on an OCU. So if I wake the OCU just by pressing the on button, you'll see it wakes up, self-tests. I'll come back with passive state, which is the green status LED on here and nothing else. You can see it's now in here. I can click on it and click connect. I'm going to put in the default password, which is in the user manual, 219547. It may connect first time. Sometimes it doesn't connect first time. If it doesn't connect, re-enter the password 2 or 3 times. If that fails to connect after 2 or 3 times, restart CattronLink. Occasionally, after you've been doing some programming, it won't reconnect. So now I'm connected. It shows the device information here in this screen. If I move to the firmware tab here, there are 3 processors, master, slave and radio in a device. Here I have the master selected. It shows the existing characteristic is 1023, slave 1023, and the radio over here. I'll demonstrate the master. So the partner, I am connected to an MCU at the moment. You'll notice 8999 means it's an MCU. The radio is always 9027 over here. I'm going to browse for the radio firmware. I'll go to the desktop and find the firmware I want. And 902702 would be the MCU. The 902701 is the OCU, which is the one I've got there. You click on open. So it's now showing 1020D, and it's actually what I've already loaded, so I've already done that firmware upgrade, and the CRC, as you can see, is the same. If I want to do the upgrade now, I'd simply press the upgrade button and it would push that firmware into the OCU. So if I click on that, you'll see, I mean, it's warning me it's the same thing, do I want to do it? But I'll do it for the sake of demonstration, so I'll click on yes. And it's now upgrading that radio firmware into the OCU. You can see all the time I'm connected, the status LED in the OCU is flashing blue, whereas normally it'd be flashing green, or a static green for passive state, and it would normally be off in transmitting mode. We'll look at that in a minute. So it'll take about a minute to upgrade that firmware in the radio, so I'll leave it to do that. When it's finished, you'll see the OCU will reboot. All of these lights will flash, and it will tell you over here that it's rebooting as it's loaded that firmware into the radio processor. So it's rebooting now. And then it'll attempt to reconnect to the device. In fact, on this particular device, when it gets to the end of the firmware, it quite often doesn't reconnect. So I'll go back to the firmware tab. I can click on this tab on the right hand side here, recent devices, and I can double click on that. I'm going to restart the OCU, in fact. So I turned it off by pressing and holding the stop button for 3 seconds, and I turn it back on again. Okay, so CattronLink is now reconnected to it, and I've now got all of that firmware updated. If I go to the configuration tab down here, so the configuration file sets the frequency, the address on some systems, it sets the modes of operation, it sets the way the switches work or the relays are mapped, and in the configuration file I can go and find a configuration file which I want to load for a particular functionality. So I'm going to load the config file for a S-Series 32 OCU. Click on open. It'll load that configuration file. I need to change one parameter in there. And now I'm going to write that to the OCU. It's a very small file, so it won't take long to do that function. It'll reboot the OCU. So I now have an OCU that is now configured to a particular firmware and a particular mode of operation. It's going to attempt to reconnect to it, so you can see it's reconnected to it. As you can see there, the blue flashing LED is back on. I'm going to disconnect from that now. I'll just click on new device. I could just shut it down, but I'll just leave it on for the moment. You see the OCU's gone back to passive state, green LEDs on. So now what I've effectively got is an MCU on the left, which is configured as an S-Series MCU, which is Bluetooth only. And I've got this is actually a 325 OCU, but it's configured as a S32 OCU, which will only operate in Bluetooth mode. At the moment, they are not associated with each other. This could have been delivered as a spare for this MCU, but they don't know each other. If I try to turn this on now, so if I go through the start sequence, it'll just revert back to passive state straight away. Nothing will happen. This needs to be associated to that. In order to do that, I would have to go through the association sequence of press and holding the on button for 10 seconds. The status LED changes to blue. After they've learnt each other's identity, you get a green flash on LED 1 and it goes back to ready. These are now associated. That has learnt the MCU has learnt the OCU. If I now go through the start sequence, it works as expected.